The following interview was conducted with Miss Ney for the HIA Oral History Project. It took place on May 22nd, 2012 in Miss Ney's office. The interviewer is Abigail Bars. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the first question. In your previous interview, you mentioned that one of the benefits of teaching here was the freedom in designing your own courses.
Mm-hmm.
Hemingway and, by extension, Lost Generation literature, it seemed like, sprung from your shared Michigan connection with Hemingway.
Mm-hmm.
What were the roots of critical approaches to literature?
I think what happened there is that I was in therapy myself, and I had bought a book called Meeting the Shadow. And in reading the collection of those articles, I began to think about books that would actually portray those things. And believe it or not, I selected those books before I actually read one of the articles which suggested all those books. So it was so exciting. It's been in existence a long, long time. And it changed titles from Meeting the Shadow to Critical Approaches to Literature, because that sounded a little more scholarly.
Mm-hmm. Next question actually kind of comes off of that. How does the process go when you're choosing books for Critlit? Have you added or removed any books over time?
I have. I started in one of the initial classes, I put Dracula in there. And Dracula by Stoker is so long, and it wasn't equal to, what we were getting out of it. There were a lot better books that portrayed the themes and the psychology that we were invested in.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one. And then I used to have a book called The Shadow by Robert Bly. And then in the Meeting the Shadow book, we have his article on the bag. And I thought, well, that's sufficient. I also added the fairy tales. I added the Dow and Mother Goose. And as time went on, it just kind of morphed into what it is today. And I'm so happy with what it is today, because I always ask students about the various works, and I just can't take any of them out. I've thought of other ones that I'd like to go in, and I thought, well, what would I take out? And Beloved was probably the most recent one that I added, and students absolutely loved that one.
Yeah. I remember you mentioned Dow and the fairy tales entering in a little later,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just wondering what kind of spurred, because Dow was really multicultural. It was an interesting experience because it was from another culture,
Mm-hmm.
and I was wondering what kind of spurred those into the course.
Well, I'm a great book lover, and I go all over the place to book sales, and I just happened upon that book. And also, at one point, we had taught the Dow and Pooh in colloque, and students absolutely loved it. But we did have a professor from Ball State tell us, he sent over a great big envelope of material saying it wasn't scholarly and it didn't show all the characteristics of Taoism. And so we thought, well, what the heck, and we took it out of colloque. But then in the meantime, when I saw this, I had Bettelheim in there first with the fairy tales. And then I thought, this would really be a good place to start, because it's the nursery rhymes, and the nursery rhymes then go into the fairy tales, and then we go into mythology, and, it was just a perfect beginning.
Which book read during Critlit would you say holds the most personal significance?
Oh, should I be honest here or not?
Yes.
Be honest?
Yes.
I would say A Doll's House. My favorite book in the course is Beloved. But the one that really affects me emotionally and personally is A Doll's House, because I had a father that was just like Torvald. And every time I read that play and see the movie, it just pushes my buttons like you would not believe. And I react in life to people who are very authoritative and, you know, really bossy. Um, and it means a lot to me that Nora, in the end, stood up for herself. I finally did that with my father, too. So that's the honest
Thank
truth.
you so much for that.
Oh, dear.
That's okay. It's posterity now. It's excellent. What would you say is the importance of actually meeting one's shadow?
I think it's so healthy, because so many of us have had people put us down in various ways and have shamed us and blamed us, and we carry around a lot of baggage and a lot of negative thoughts about ourselves because of what the voices, the tapes in our head. And once students come into Crit Lit and learn that it's okay to cry, it's okay to get mad, it's okay to have negative feelings as long as they're expressed appropriately, and that you're not a bad person just because of these things. I think it's so helpful to everybody involved, and it reminds me every year too of how I should be. At the end of every course, I always have a couple people who completely open up and talk about some very, very personal things and how the course has helped them. And even if it's just one student, this course is worth it. And it makes me so happy. I'm really glad we have this course.
Excellent. What are your hopes for any student entering this course? I guess you kind of discussed that a little bit. You're just hoping for some sort of catharsis.
One of the things I do when they enter the course is that I insist on maturity and sensitivity. I will not allow anybody to shame or blame anybody in the course. And when people share personal feelings and thoughts, everybody is to receive that accordingly. And so I establish a tone right from the very beginning. And it's always worked. It's always worked.
What do you think is it about that environment that makes students want to rise to the occasion? Because I know some people probably fought their impulse to react negatively to someone else's thoughts or feelings. What do you think it is that sets that up so well for them? Is it just you setting that tone from the beginning?
I think so. Yeah. And also, one of the things I do, I tell them a lot about my own personal life. Because I don't want anybody to feel that, it's an invasion of privacy and that they have to discuss their own personal life. I mean, after all, the course really is a literature course. And, we're looking at the characters. But in the beginning, when we're doing theory, I use a lot of my own personal examples. And some of them, are, you don't just tell anybody these things. So I think when they see that I have the courage to tell things about my own personal life, it allows them to open up and know that they can be trusted if I have been trusted by the students and accepted. It's pretty scary, though.
I can see.
It really is.
Yeah. What are the benefits and the risks of being exposed to the concept of the like the formalized concept of the shadow during adolescence, do you think?
Well, if they really take it seriously, it prevents a lot of things that could happen later on. It encourages people at this age to take risks. It encourages people to be more open. A lot of people they don't have it happen until middle age, and they also are expressing their negative feelings inappropriately. And, with the concept of the shadow and how healthy it can make you psychologically, um, I wish I had had a course like this when I was your age. It took me too long to see this.
You kind of talked about how it's also a literature course.
It is a literature course.
Yeah, it is a literature course. And I'm wondering how, when you began the course, like, how'd you reconcile the two? Because it is a literature course, but it's also got these kind of personal connotations. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you had a set plan on how you were going to deal with those, or if you just kind of took them as they came.
Yes, I couldn't just have students plunge into the literature without understanding the concepts, without understanding the theory, without understanding Jung and Freud ahead of time. So my initial plan was to introduce students, in the first 4 weeks to all the theory that was needed. And I think the Handbook to Critical Approaches, which is a very valid handbook, and it teaches us how to approach literature from the psychological and the archetypal approach, is, that's really where I started. And then I went into the other books, like Meeting a Shadow and, the Tao and the Bettelheim. But really, the literature is what is very, very significant.
In Critlit, our final exam grade was a creative project. If you were to do a creative project based on what we learn in Critlit, what would it be?
Oh my God, that would take a lot of thought.
I know.
What a question. Let's see, what would I do?
I took chemistry in college and high school.
I probably would write a song that would begin at the beginning of the literature and go through the end, and have characters in the song speaking their pieces. And then I would set it to music and play it on the piano and sing.
That sounds like it would be excellent.
Now, whether that would be materialized or not, I don't know.
But the concept is awesome.
Yeah. And of course I would go through theory afterwards.
Yes. So switching gears a little bit, why, other than your shared roots, do you think you connect so well with Ernest Hemingway?
Well, it really is my shared roots that does it. Because I'm so close to nature, and he's writing about my hometown territory, the whole Upper Peninsula and northern Michigan, and I love Paris, and my dad, was a real Hemingway. He wasn't a Hemingway reader, but he was a Hemingway kind of personified. He didn't like it when I told him that. He said, well, he was such an awful man. I said, yes, but there were so many good aspects to him that, really remind me of you. The whole hunting and the fishing and the war and all those things are my dad personified. But when it comes right down to when I have to argue with somebody and defend Hemingway, because, he was an alcoholic and he was a womanizer, and, I've done so much research on him, and I know both sides of him. And the Hemingway I love is the sensitive Hemingway who appreciates black squirrels and loves the woods, loves the Native Americans. He was best friends with them growing up. But most of all, the Hemingway who lived his life, he lived every single second of his life. And I'm sure even when he shot himself at the end of his life, there wasn't any more for him to write because he'd already won the Nobel Prize. And he was so sick he couldn't write anymore. And he done just about everything somebody can do. I have a map that I show the students, and there's pinpoints of where Hemingway was in entire life, through the world. And it's amazing. There was hardly a place where Hemingway didn't go, and hardly anything he didn't do. He really was a man's man, which is interesting that I would appreciate him so much. But it's more so that he didn't waste time in his life, and he lived it to the fullest, and that's what I want to do. That's what I'm doing.
Why do you think that students generally develop a strong connection to either Crit Lit or Lost Gen, whichever they're in? Because I've noticed that a lot. When you talk to somebody who's been in the class, they have a strong allegiance to it. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about why that develops.
I think that develops because of the teacher's passion for the subject, and how the teacher instills the passion that he or she has into the students. And I firmly believe, in teaching any class, that the more depth you have, the more knowledge you have, the more stories you have to tell, it just engages the students and they get drawn in. And it becomes their subject too. And it happens in both Lost Gen and in Crit Lit. It really is the way to teach. If you skim the surface and just do a whole lot of stuff, the passion is lacking. And you've got to get the depth in there, and you've got to get big, broad themes and ideas, and students have to be able to identify. You have to bring it into the modern day period, and let students be able to see how this is also true today. But it's passion, I think. In one word, it's passion.
That actually links into another question. Do you think that teaching something that has some connection to like your identity can result in a richer educational experience for the students?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because you talk about how you relate so strongly to Hemingway and these theories.
I also have a major in history, and when I first started teaching, I had to teach geography. And you talk about lack of passion. There was definitely the biggest moment was when they landed on the moon. We spent a lot of time on landing on the moon. But I was not into geography at all. I don't know if I've ever taught a course where I wasn't actually passionate about the course and could hardly wait to get over it. I don't think there ever had, because I've always designed my own courses. I've never been forced to teach something that, maybe grammar. That wasn't fun. I got really passionate about grammar. But that's it.
Yeah. Do you think that students and faculty members of the Academy have a sort of expatriate quality about them? Like, are we a little bit lost, do you think? Like, the Lost Generation authors left Paris and we came here. Do you think there's any relation there?
There's a bit of that, but not really. It all depends on the student and why they left home. And I think, maybe there is. Seeking an intellectual atmosphere. In fact, that's why I'm here. I went to a retreat. I think I told them, maybe I told them that in the other interview. I went to a retreat in my 30s, and they asked the question, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Ideally. And I said, and I was at a really, really good school, and taught the best classes, the honors classes, and very happy there. But I said, I really would like to see myself in an extremely, a real intellectual atmosphere where everybody cares about learning. And I said, I see myself in a great big room with a grand piano and a fireplace and cushiony chairs and everybody sitting around talking about ideas. And, preferably in a woods or something, something really pretty. And lo and behold, this isn't exactly what I had in mind. But we do have the big cushy chairs in the lounge. And there are lots of ideas and people who truly care, about ideas. And it doesn't matter, which discipline it is. But, Dr. Smith, Dr. Jeff Smith, is so in love with his violets and loves his tomato garden in the summertime. And, there have been so many people here who have really interesting lives and interesting passions. And it's fun to be a part of that community. And I forgot what your original question was, but I'm way off track.
Oh, you're pretty much just about being lost or maybe expatriate.
Well, I think the reason why I was drawn here is the same reason students are. If you're in an atmosphere where people aren't thinkers and you're bright and people don't care about ideas, you're going to be a whole lot happier with people who do care about ideas and people who are imaginative and creative. And so when they come here, it's almost like maybe the expatriates going to Paris to be with other writers, and musicians and artists. And I think there is a good connection there. There really is. Unless you were forced to come here. Or unless your number one reason was to get into the best college. I think primarily the academy draws people who care about learning. And that's what's been the joy for me. Because when I walk into the classroom, in all my classes, students are engaged. I love to see the light in their eyes. And there are so many lights and sparkles. And that's what learning's all about.
Final structured question. What have you discovered about yourself through your teaching and experiences here? Or what have you discovered about human nature in general? But more specifically, yourself.
Well, I discovered that I really have found a home here. When I first came to Muncie and rode through all those big, tall cornfields, I thought, oh my God, where am I going? I'm going to the other end of the universe. Why am I leaving Chicago and all the culture and everything to go to this place in the middle of cornfields? But when I got here, I discovered, and I asked this one guy because I wasn't happy at first. I asked this professor from Ball State, I said, how long does it take to acclimate yourself to a new place with new people, a new job? I said, will I ever grow to love Muncie? And he said, oh, it'll probably take about 7 years. And I was thinking about it today as I was riding through campus and looking at the buildings. At first, I just felt like a fish out of water. And as I was riding through campus today, I thought, this has really become my home. I feel so comfortable here. And I've had to go to Bracken almost every day to get movies, for the May-term class. And I feel so comfortable there. And, I love to be in Bracken with all the books and to see the students all studying there, and to see them on campus. I again forgot what your question was, but what was it?
It was just, what have you discovered about yourself?
I've discovered, that I had a journey to take and ended up where I really should be. I have never had a moment of unhappiness here. I love my classroom. I love my job. I love preparing for my job. It's not even a job, it's a way of life. And I discovered my happiness in my niche here. And I've even grown to love Muncie a little more.
grows on you.
It does.
It does.
That wasn't a great answer. But...
No, it was an excellent answer. I liked it. Do you have any further statements that you'd like to get out there?
Yes, I'm going to open this jar.
The statement I would like to get out there is that, what really makes this school are the students. When I come in the fall, we have all those meetings and everything during the first week. It's just so uncomfortable, and you can hardly wait to start teaching and to meet the students. And it's so exciting every year to meet new people, new students. And it's also very, very sad to see seniors graduate. We only get to know you for 2 years. And it's a short period of time, and we really do grow to love you. And I would say that if I had children, I would want them to be in this atmosphere, where people truly do care about them. And sometimes, students think, you're so strict and you're doing this and I have so much work and all I do is work. But in the end, further down the line, you look back and you think, oh my gosh, that was the best experience of my life. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And it truly is the student who makes this place great.
Well, thank you so much for
People
the
like
interview.
you, Abigail.
No, it's immortalized.
Absolutely. People like you.
God.
Yes, when I read your paper, my gosh, I had chills.
I have to type this later.
You have to type it verbatim? Oh, really?
It's there forever.
Good. Oh, I'm so glad I said that.
Well, thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome.